How to read and interpret poetry. While there are different methods of approaching poetry, there are some general guidelines that have proved helpful for many readers. Try these steps. First, read through the poem once and see how much of the author's meaning you can immediately grasp. Then go back through the poem a second time, line by line, to find all the images and symbols that refer to outside reference works or to other poems by the same author, if necessary. If you are still having difficulty understanding the poem, consider translating each line into prose, or substitute simpler words for more difficult ones. When you understand all the basic words and ideas in the poem, reread the poem a few more times to grasp its entire meaning. Follow the punctuation. Poetry will make a great deal more sense if you read it in an everyday speaking tone, letting the accents fall where they seem natural. Pay attention to the punctuation the author uses, ending a line only when the punctuation indicates that it is correct to do so. The punctuation marks in poetry tell us how the author wishes the work to be read. For example, a period or an exclamation mark can be thought of as a complete stop, while a comma, in contrast, would be a pause or a half stop. As a result, there is no need to stop at the end of a line of poetry unless there is some punctuation mark to indicate that we must. Here is an example of what we mean. Farewell, too little and too lately known, whom I began to think and call my own, for sure our souls were near allied, and thine cast in the same poetic mold with mine. These first 4 lines of John Dryden's poem To the Memory of Mr. Oldham show several uses of the pause. When a line of verse has a pause at its end, as in known, own, and mine, the line is called end-stopped. Pauses within a line, as after the words little and allied, are called caesuras, which means little pause. When there is no pause at the end of a line, as in line 3 of this example, one line flows into the next. The line is called a run-on line or an enjambment. These effects are especially common in modern verse. When you read poetry, follow the poet's directions. Do not insert punctuation where none is indicated, and do not force a word to be stressed that would not normally be stressed. Use your common sense and pronounce each line as you would normally speak, and the poem will make a great deal more sense to you. Look for symbols, allusions, and other clues. Since poetry is so highly condensed, most poets construct meaning by aligning words in new and interesting ways, drawing on conventional symbols and allusions or references, and even creating private symbols of their own. You should not have too much difficulty understanding conventional allusions and symbols. If you do, nearly all can easily be looked up in a dictionary, encyclopedia, or other reference texts. Private symbols can be more difficult to understand. In these instances, see how the images relate to the rest of the poem. Draw together all the different parts of the poem as you would a jigsaw puzzle to find the missing piece. Let's apply the suggestions outlined to the reading and interpretation of the poem that follows. Sailing to Byzantium. That is no country for old men. The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations, at their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel-crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl, commend all summer long whatever is begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress, nor is there singing school but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. O sages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, Pern and Agyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire, and fasten to a dying animal it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come. by W.B. Yeats from the Tower, 1928. When interpreting Sailing to Byzantium, a convenient place to start is the title. According to the dictionary, Byzantium was an ancient Greek city on the Bosphorus and the Sea of Marmara. Its buildings were characterized by a highly formal structure and the use of color. However, this doesn't tell us why Yeats selected this particular empire. There were, after all, many other ancient cities noted for the same qualities. Looking through other poems by the same author, as well as critical studies of his work, we find that Byzantium had become for Yeats the symbol for art or artifice, as contrasted to the natural world of biological activities. As Yeats matured, he turned away from the sensual world of growth and constant change to the world of art. Later, though, he would return to the sensual world. As he wrote in his work, A Vision, "I think that if I could be given a month of antiquity and leave to spend it anywhere I chose, I would spend it in Byzantium, what we today call Istanbul, a little before Justinian opened St. Sophia and closed the Academy of Plato around 535 AD. I think that in early Byzantium, religious, aesthetic, and practical life were one, that architects and artificers spoke to the multitude in gold and silver. In his old age, the poet rejected the world of growth and death, biological change, to turn instead to structures of what he called unaging intellect." Look at the first line and stanza. This discussion we have had fits with the opening line reference to old men, which we also could have discovered by looking up Yeats's age when he wrote this poem, and the date of the poem itself. Yeats lived from 1865 to 1939, and this poem was published in 1927 when the poet was 62 years old. Thus, we can also infer that the poem has some autobiographical leanings. The entire first stanza discusses the natural world of biological activity, the endless process of creatures being begotten, born, and dying. The speaker is an old man, he states, turning away from all this. Study the second stanza. The second stanza continues with this theme of the aging man, here made into a brilliant and often quoted symbol of the tattered coat upon a stick. And so, seeking the unchanging world of art, the speaker comes symbolically to all that Byzantium has come to represent. Move on to the third stanza. The gold mosaic in the third stanza refers to mosaic figures on the walls of the Church of the Hagia Sophia, or Holy Wisdom in Byzantium. There are two words that must be explained in this stanza. The first is pern, which means a bobbin, reel, or spoon, and can be spelled P-I-R-N. The second is gyre, which means to whirl around in a spiral motion. This had become one of Yeats's favorite words, which he used as a verb meaning to spin around. He associated this spinning with the spinning of fate. Here he is asking the saints on the wall to descend and enter in this symbolic spinning motion, and thus help him enter into their state of being. We see this in the final line of the stanza, "and gather me into the artifice of eternity." Conclude with the final stanza. Once he is able to leave the natural flux, he says in the final stanza he shall not again assume a natural shape. Rather, he will assume the form that Grecian workers of old might fashion. The form is specifically that of a bird. His notes say that he had read somewhere that in the emperor's palace in Byzantium was a tree made of gold and silver and artificial birds that sang. Therefore, we can conclude that gyre and Byzantium are keywords in this poem, and their special meaning shed light on his feelings about life, art, and approaching old age. In this poem, he is turning away from the natural world to embrace the timeless world of art, represented for him in the symbol of Byzantium.